Jerry Prokopovich with Civil War Talk Radio. None of us were there, but when we read about or talk about the Civil War, we all see pictures in our heads. Where do those pictures come from? What are the sources of the visual images of the Civil War that remain with us today? Well, today we'll talk with an artist who has made a career of creating rich, detailed visual images of the Civil War and other military events. Join us for a conversation with Don Troiani on Civil War Talk Radio.
Onboard computers to improve fuel efficiency and reduce emissions.
Check.
Acoustic and optical wayside monitors to enhance safety.
Check.
Robotic systems to measure track geometry.
Check.
GPS tracking and tracing systems.
Check.
Sounds like a rocket or a jet getting ready for takeoff, doesn't it? Actually, it's something just as technologically advanced. A freight train. There's a new world of technology riding the rails that makes today's freight railroads more fuel efficient, safer, and cleaner running than ever. With wireless communications, transponders, and trackside readers that can pinpoint a shipment's location at speeds of up to 80 miles an hour, North America's freight railroads are driving the technology required by today's businesses and consumers. And with everything from apples to computers moving by rail, we wouldn't have it any other way. Chances are, the things you'll use tomorrow are taking the train today. Tomorrow, arriving by train. Sponsored by North America's Freight Railroads.
Mission critical. 2 words that describe the data vital to every e-commerce website. If your company needs the services of an unparalleled co-location facility, you need to remember these 2 words: Castle Access. With Castle Access, your internet servers will be secure in environmentally controlled data centers that offer high-speed managed internet access and the highest standards of 24/7 customer support. For more info, visit castleaccess.com. Castle Access. We keep you online all the time.
World Talk Radio, bringing the world to you.
Welcome to Civil War Talk Radio. I'm Jerry Prokopovich, talking from my office at East Carolina University, but not speaking on behalf of the university, which is perhaps not even aware that I'm here at this moment. The subject today is art of the Civil War, in particular that created by our guest, Don Troiani, who is a painter of Civil War and other historical subjects. Before we even start talking, though, I'd like to urge anyone listening to open another window in your browser and go to the following website, www.historicalartprints.com. Historical Art Prints is all one word. There you'll find some of the art of our guest today, because if we're going to talk about visual images, that's a futile exercise if you can't actually see them. But there's a place where you'll be able to see a lot of what our guest has done. With that said, let me welcome Don Troiani. Don, how are you doing this morning?
Hi, fine. How are you?
Good. Did I get the website correct there?
Yeah.
We'd love to have people take a look at your work as we're talking about it today. Now, let me start by asking about your background. How did you get started in the art world?
Well, I mean, it started basically with stick figures in kindergarten. You know, the usual kid war pictures, and I just kept doing them. And I went to art school, went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Art between 1967 and about 71, but they don't teach you much in art school anymore, so I'm basically self-taught.
What do they do in art school, if they're curious?
You worry about not hurting your feelings, and usually criticism was sort of considered destructive of your creativity. So actually learning something might stifle your imagination.
Well, we don't want to do that, certainly. We don't want to injure anyone's self-esteem by suggesting they don't already know everything.
Well, there was quite a bit of that. I mean, this was 1967, 68, so most of the teachers didn't even show up for class anyway. You were just left there with the model, and I learned more. They had a very good museum at the school, you know, all the Thomas Eakins and Homer paintings and so forth, and you could learn more just going up and looking at those.
Interesting. So you got started with an art school education, we'll say in quotes, and then went on to continue painting on your own. Did you immediately find work in the art field?
Some. I started doing a lot of work for the National Park Service, who always liked using me. In fact, they still do, because, basically they could just say, do a soldier of the 34th Regiment of Foot or whatever it's going to be, and they could leave it to me. They didn't have to do anything else. And some work for American Heritage and things like that. Mostly illustration work.
It sounds like it's all history-oriented, though. Was this your interest?
Yeah. No, I decided, a long time ago I would specialize in that, because doing anything else for me was boring.
Was the Civil War a particular interest, or is it history generally that got you?
In general, the Civil War followed a collecting interest, because I liked uniforms. I was a very strong Revolutionary War collector, but you could never get any uniforms. But in the Civil War, you can still readily get them. And so I started moving into that direction. About the same time, I was doing some Western prints, and we tried a Civil War one, and it did really well. So everything sort of fell together. It was about 1984 that things fell together, in that direction.
That would be a good time to get involved in Civil War studies. That's just a few years before Ken Burns produced his television piece, and public interest really took off at that point.
Yeah, it did, and that was a catalyst. And the movie Gettysburg, and of course, they both elevated Joshua Chamberlain from pretty much obscurity, into being a major figure with Lee and Jackson.
That's true. I can recall in the 70s. No, one more decade. In the 80s, I can recall going to the Joshua Chamberlain Museum in Brunswick, Maine, which was a completely obscure, out-of-the-way location, but suddenly now it's a major stop. It has attracted a lot of attention.
You could see it even in the autograph prices. Chamberlain didn't bring too much more than any other Union colonel before that, a little bit more, but then all of a sudden, his autograph and CDVs and so forth are worth thousands.
So people who got into the ground floor of Chamberlain were in the right place.
Actually, I got a lot of his stuff.
Really?
I got a call from a family, this is, I guess, about 1990, and they said, we have some colonel's things we'd like to sell. And he was a general later, and I said, who? And they said, Joshua Chamberlain. I thought it was one of my friends calling up, to fool around. And it was actually descendants. They were not blood descendants, but they had inherited. And I got 150 war letters, his gauntlets, his commissions, quite a bit of stuff. A lot of the letters are unpublished.
Do you plan to do anything with these?
Well, I did. I sold them to the. I kept a few, and the commissions and the gauntlets and shoulder straps for myself. But I'm not a paper collector, so I sold them to the National Museum at Harrisburg, which says they're going to publish them, but I don't know if they will or not.
Well, it's good to know, though. Then they're accessible to researchers. Maybe they'll be published one day.
Eventually I'm sure they will be. About 100 were love letters to his wife before the war. Ones that he certainly never thought anyone else would be reading. And the war letters, there's a good number of unpublished ones there, too.
Well, I think that will be of high interest. 30 years ago, when scholars were collecting letters of Civil War figures, they would routinely weed out the personal ones and just print the war ones. Mm-hmm. But the way the public's interest has evolved, I would imagine there'd be a pretty...
No, there were some good ones in here. There was one where his wife was... he was telling his wife how to work the politicians at home to get him a promotion.
Excellent.
Things that you wouldn't associate with him, there were also versions, apparently, of some of the published ones that may have been the original versions. And then, he made edited versions later, which are the ones that went into books and things.
That's right. I believe there's some controversy. His famous account of the surrender at Appomattox that has been printed many times, in the last few years was challenged as to whether that was really quite happening.
That wasn't there. That was the letters were like 62 to about 64, and then they cut off. But, there was interesting stuff. Like, there, up till Fredericksburg, he had a full beard. And then he mentions, getting it, the beard trimmed and having like a waxed mustache at that point. I did a print on him based on his description in the letters of exactly how he looked at Fredericksburg, which, of course, isn't like the movie.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even 20th Maine wasn't that heavily engaged in the battle. You know, they had to jazz it up for the movie.
Yes, to make things more spectacular. Well, now that I can see if you have the letters of someone like Chamberlain, it would be tempting to then do a painting of his work. How, in general, do you come up with the subjects of your visual work?
It's a couple of different ways. First, the easiest way is if somebody commissions me to do it, and then I'll read about it. And if it seems like a good subject, I'll do it. And the rest is just by reading. Usually before I go to sleep every night, I read out of different books, whatever's off the bookshelf for an hour or so, and it makes me sleepy. And you just read something and it sounds like it'll make a good painting, and then you do further research, and sometimes it doesn't. You find out that the sides didn't get that close together, or it wasn't like the account you read. A lot of things really fall apart under research.
Tell me about your research. What kind of things do you look at?
Well, you have to look at a lot of things. Almost most important, because it is a picture and you're not writing about it, or things like what color horse was Hancock's aide-de-camp riding. That's an important thing because you've got to show it. And an author can just say, well, he rode up. He doesn't have to say what color horse. So I have different things to deal with.
Now, where would you find that? I would, as a historian, I would know where to look for an account of say Hancock and Howard at Gettysburg debating who's in command, but it has never occurred to me to think about what color horses they were on.
You read all the accounts and you hope it's mentioned there. Sometimes you can go into their personal papers in the National Archives or other places, and it'll be mentioned. A lot of times you can read back if that individual wrote a memoir, and he might mention 100 pages before that his dapple gray or something like that, or someone else may mention it. With the case of the Confederates, if you go into their personal archives, like I was doing the one of Elijah White leading the Confederate Comanche Battalion at Brandy Station, and we went to his personal papers, and he mentioned, I guess, having a horse either killed at Brandy Station or around that time, and it was a dapple gray, and because he had to get a receipt to get a new horse.
So there you had the first-hand evidence.
I just collect it. Every time I read a description anywhere of an officer, of any prominence, or a staff officer of another general, where it mentions a horse color or anything about his uniform, he had a straw hat or this or that, I keep huge files for like 35 years, and I just keep putting all this stuff in.
Wonderful.
A lot of times when you pull the file, it's already there.
It does occur to me as we're talking that I was recently reading letters from a soldier in one of Custer's, in Custer's Michigan brigade, cavalry brigade, and he mentioned that Custer had the companies, or the regiments, I guess. Was it companies of the regiment? I don't recall. Each company mounted on a different color horse, and other officers thought that was an affectation. They didn't care for it, but it was Custer's style to color code his companies.
Well, it'd be easier to see at a distance, That's why the buglers had, the bars across the fronts of the jackets, and usually rode gray horses, so the officers could spot them.
So it's not just vanity. There's a military reason for that.
Yeah, it may well have been so Custer could, identify each company at a distance.
Interesting. So you have your own research files. Yeah, you're located in Connecticut, is that right?
Yeah.
So you have a certain amount of research material, not too far away, I imagine, in some other repositories.
No, not really. The key stuff I have here is on uniforms, and then if what I don't have, now I can just send out emails to other students of uniforms and see what they have and put it all together.
It occurs to me that the collection at Brown University in Providence has a fair amount of uniform information.
They're mostly in the earlier periods. They have a lot where they came in real handy. Last time I think I used that source was when I did the Lee at Gettysburg, and there were foreign staff officers, and Fitzgerald Ross, who was with Lee, an Austrian officer, had been in the 6th Hussars, and so I needed to recreate the Austrian 6th Hussar uniform for the for the painting, which I did. But Brown had a lot of good stuff on that regiment.
At one of the other foreign officers at Gettysburg was, of course, Colonel Fremantle. Mm-hmm. But as I recall, he was not wearing a uniform.
No, he was in civilian clothes. I think he had what they called a Norfolk jacket, which was a pleated jacket. There was a good photograph taken of him in something, I can't remember what, where he described it as what he was wearing during the campaign.
And yet in the Gettysburg movie, they put him in red.
Yeah, you can't use movies for reference.
No.
Movies are strictly entertainment. I mean, even Cold Mountain, which I was a technical advisor on, I mean, we really fixed it up a lot. It was Brian Pohanka and Mike Krause and myself. But it was more not what we got them to do, as what we stopped them from doing.
For example?
Well, like the original scene at Petersburg, instead of having the Confederates living in the trenches, they were going to have them at a big chow wagon in a big, camp of nice white tents, all lined up for chow, and they had a picture of some kind of sanitary commission coffee kitchen, this big portable thing with chimneys and stuff, and that's what they were going to use. Plus, they had a Confederate flag mounted on the earthworks about every 20 feet. It looked like a Renaissance fair. So, we got rid of a lot of that stuff, and we got them to do better stuff. But we couldn't fix everything, but we got about 80% of it fixed.
Well, that must have been some experience. Did you actually go overseas for the filming of that?
No. Brian and Mike Krause did, but fortunately I didn't have to go. I did most of it right out of the house. It was mostly reading the script and seeing what they would need for that scene and sending them the pictures of the battle flags and telling them, how to make them. And, all the corps badges. A lot of what we did wound up on the cutting room floor. You didn't see... we spent a lot of time on federal cap insignias and corps badges and all these Massachusetts flags, getting all the details right and the right spear finials and so forth. And the movie came, where is it? They cut half an hour out of the film. We went to see a preliminary version, and they cut a good half hour out, and a lot of the half hour was the fighting at the crater, and the hospital scene they cut out completely.
So that would be, hopefully that survives somewhere, might be shown.
Maybe there'll be some director's cut DVD, that comes out. You'll pick it up there, because they cut out a lot.
Well, we are going to cut out for just a moment here and take a short break. We'll be back in just a moment to talk more about Civil War art with our guest, Don Troiani, on Civil War Talk Radio.